My landlord had hidden cameras in my apartment. Here is exactly how I found them. I lived in that apartment for 14 months before I found it. A small lens, no bigger than a pinhole, hidden inside a smoke detector I'd walked under hundreds of times. The camera had a 128-gigabyte memory card. I'm going to tell you exactly what I found, how I found it, what happened after, and most importantly, how you can check your own home right now. Because if this happened to me, it can happen to anyone. I rented a furnished apartment in 2022. It was a good deal's central location, utilities included, fully furnished so I didn't have to move much in. The landlord, a man in his late 50s, seemed like a normal guy, prompt with maintenance, not overly intrusive. He had a key, obviously, and the lease said he could enter with 24 hours notice for inspections, standard stuff. I never had any reason to question him. The apartment came with a few smart home devices already installed: a thermostat, a video doorbell for the front door, and several smoke detectors. I noticed early on that the smoke detectors seemed slightly newer than the rest of the place, but I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? Smoke detectors don't need to be old. Over the first few months, I noticed little things that made me mildly uncomfortable. Items that seemed to have moved slightly between my being home and coming back. Not dramatically, just a mug on the wrong side of the counter, a jacket that seemed hung differently than I'd left it. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was tired. I almost convinced myself. The thing that changed everything was completely random. I was watching a video online, ironically, a home security video, and it mentioned that spy cameras are often disguised as everyday household items: clocks, chargers, and yes, smoke detectors. I watched it mostly out of curiosity, but afterward, I found myself staring at the smoke detector in my living room. It was positioned in a strange spot, not near the kitchen, not near any obvious fire risk, but directly above and facing the couch and the room entrance. I'd never thought about why it was placed there before. I walked over and looked up at it. It looked completely normal, standard white plastic dome. But I noticed a tiny irregularity in the surface, a very slight darkening that could have been a shadow or could have been a lens. I talked myself out of it and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The next day, I went to the hardware store and bought an RF detector, a device that picks up radio frequency signals, commonly used to sweep rooms for hidden transmitters. They cost between $20 and $80. I came home, turned off my Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to reduce interference, and swept the room. When I pointed the detector at that smoke detector, it lit up, not like a false positive. It went wild. I took the detector down carefully, wearing gloves because I'd watched enough crime shows to know not to add my prints to anything. I examined it. The plastic was slightly thicker on one side than it should have been. I pressed a small release catch and the cover came off. Inside, alongside the standard smoke sensor components, was a small secondary module, a Wi-Fi-enabled micro camera. It had a motion sensor and a 128-gigabyte SD card. I set it down, sat on my floor, and tried to process what I was looking at. Then I methodically went through every single device in the apartment: the other smoke detectors, the thermostat housing, a USB wall charger in the bedroom that had been there when I moved in. That charger had a camera too. These were not devices he'd slipped in quietly. They had been there when I moved in. They were part of the furnished apartment. This man had been filming tenants, potentially for years. I did not touch the memory cards. I did not accuse him. I did not act normal at first, and then I realized acting normal was exactly what I needed to do. I texted my landlord saying I had a minor question about the lease and asked him to stop by in a couple of days. He said sure. In the meantime, I called a lawyer. Then I called the police. They advised me to document everything photographically before moving anything. I photographed every device from multiple angles, with a timestamp visible in each photo. I noted their locations, their positions, the directions they faced. The detective I spoke with told me this was more common than I wanted to believe. She said in furnished short-term and medium-term rental situations, hidden camera cases were something her department had dealt with multiple times. She also told me that landlord intent can be hard to prove without the footage, so the SD cards were crucial evidence. When police executed a warrant for the landlord's devices, they found a network-attached storage drive at his home. The drive had been set to automatically receive footage from multiple properties he owned, not just mine. There were 3 other apartments in the same building and 2 properties in another part of the city, all furnished, all with the same devices. He had footage going back at least 4 years. Some of the tenants in that footage had never been notified. Some had already moved away with no idea any of this had happened. The landlord was arrested. He claimed, and I still find this almost impossible to process, that the cameras were for property protection and that he had technically disclosed them in a clause buried in the lease addendum. His lawyer tried to argue that the disclosure clause meant consent had been given. The clause, which I had signed without truly reading it closely, said something like, "The property may be equipped with security monitoring systems." It said nothing about where those systems were located, including inside private rooms. His argument did not hold. The prosecution successfully argued that a buried clause referencing unspecified monitoring does not constitute informed consent to being filmed in a bedroom. He pled guilty to multiple counts of unlawful surveillance. I settled a civil suit. I moved out, obviously, and I spent the next several months helping investigators identify other tenants who had been affected. Here's what I want every renter to take away from this. Number 1, buy an RF detector. They are cheap. Use it when you first move into any furnished rental. Number 2, look at every device that was in the property when you arrived. Smoke detectors, chargers, air purifiers, alarm clocks. If you didn't bring it, and it has a small hole or dark spot on the surface, look closer. Number 3, check camera angles. A smoke detector above a bed or sofa facing inward is not positioned for fire detection. Trust your geometry. Number 4, turn your phone's camera on and slowly pan around the room in the dark. Some cameras use infrared LEDs that are invisible to the naked eye, but visible to your phone camera as small glowing dots. This is not foolproof, but it's free and takes 2 minutes. And number 5, read your lease addendums, all of them. If there is any language about monitoring or security systems, ask in writing exactly what devices are installed and where. You have the right to know what is in your home. I share this story not to frighten you, but because the single best defense against this is knowing it happens. If this video helps even one person find something they shouldn't have to find, that's enough. Subscribe and share this one. Seriously. Someone you know probably needs to see it. See you next time.